May the 19th. The year is 1536. A queen stands alone on the scaffold, with the weight of history pressing down upon her. Just 3 years earlier, she was the most powerful woman in England, Henry VIII's beloved wife, and a woman who changed the course of the entire kingdom. But now she is a traitor, and she is waiting to be executed, waiting for the sword to fall upon her. But how did it come to this? Was she guilty, or was she a victim of political betrayal? Or was her fate sealed the moment she became queen? In tonight's video, we walk through her trial, her imprisonment, and her chilling moments leading up to her execution. And most haunting of all, her final words. Her words she chose to leave behind as she faced death. Were there a plea for mercy? Was it a confession? Or was it something far more shocking? This is a fall of Anne Boleyn, from trial to execution. In the late summer of 1501 or 1507, in the quiet countryside of Kent, England, a girl was born. Although no one knew it at the time, she would one day change the course of English history. She was born at Blinkley Hall in Norfolk, or Haver Castle in Kent. Although historians do debate the exact location, one thing is for certain: we know that she was raised at Haver Castle, the grand home of her father, Thomas Boleyn, who was a skilled diplomat and courtier. But he was eager to rise in the ranks of King Henry VIII's court. Her mother, Lady Elizabeth Howard, was from the powerful Howard family. Anne's childhood was not like any ordinary English girl. While many girls of her time were taught simple domestic skills, Anne's father ensured she received an elite education. By the time Anne was a teenager, she could speak fluent in French, Latin, and Italian. She could also dance, play music, and write poetry. By 1522, Anne had grown into an ambitious and sophisticated young woman. She quickly became a lady-in-waiting, the Queen Catherine of Aragon, the wife of King Henry VIII. Well, it wasn't long before Henry himself noticed Anne. Unlike many women, she didn't immediately fall for Henry's advances. Instead, she resisted, refusing to become Henry's mistress. But this only increased Henry's obsession with her. Anne demanded more than just affection. She wanted to be his wife, his queen. By this time, Henry had grown very frustrated with Catherine, because Catherine had not gave him a son that he really wanted. He then became more convinced that he needed Anne, and what followed was one of the most dangerous love stories in history. In the early morning of January 25th, 1533, King Henry VIII married Anne Boleyn in a secret service at Whitehall Place. But her reign would be short-lived. Her failure to give Henry VIII his son he always wanted, along with her political enemies at court, would soon lead to her tragic downfall. In June of 1533, Anne Boleyn is now crowned queen. In the same year, in September, she gives birth to a daughter, who she names Elizabeth. On May the 2nd of 1536, Anne was at the palace. It was a warm spring afternoon when a messenger from the king approached. whose face was grim. Anne was being summoned to the council chamber. Confused, she followed, her heart pounding. She was then confronted by some stern-faced men, including the Duke of Norfolk, her own uncle. The charges were read out aloud: treason, adultery, and even incest. Anne laughed at first. "Who dare accuse me?" she demanded. Shaking her head in disbelief, she was then taken to the Tower of London. Anne was escorted to the royal barge and rowed down the Thames. The journey was eerily familiar, as just 3 years earlier she had made the same trip. For her coronation, cheered, adored, and destined to be queen, now there were no crowds, no celebrations, only the grim silence of her getting ever closer to the Tower of London. When the Tower of London came into Anne's view, she dropped to her knees, screaming, "O Lord, help me, for I am guiltless of this crime." But Anne wasn't the only one to be trapped into Cromwell's web. The first to fall was Mark Smeaton, a court musician. He was arrested and interrogated, and under pressure, perhaps even torture, he confessed to adultery with the Queen. Then came Sir Henry Norris, a close friend of Henry's, followed by Sir Francis Weston, and then William Brereton. They all denied everything, but this fell on deaf ears. The final arrest was Anne's own brother, George Boleyn, Lord Rochford. The crime? Incest. An accusation so horrifying the whole court was left speechless. By the 10th of May, 1536, the case against Anne was set in motion. The evidence was weak: alleged affairs when Anne was pregnant, or even away from the court. But this didn't matter. This was not a trial for justice. It was a trial for power. On May the 15th, Anne was led from the chamber to the Great Hall at the Tower of London. As she walked in, with her long, beautiful, flowing gown, people gathered to watch her fate unfold. The charges read: adultery, incest, and even conspiracy to kill the king. Anne listened patiently, and when it was her turn to speak, she said in a calm and steady voice, "I do not say that I have always shown the king humility, which I owed him, considering his great kindness and great honour he showed me, but I swear on my salvation I am clear of all crimes I am accused of." Her words were met with silence. The verdict was in, and the jury had decided Anne's fate. Do you, the jury, find Anne Boleyn guilty or not guilty? Guilty, they said. Anne did not scream, neither did she beg. She just smiled and said, "I am ready to die." Her own uncle, the Duke of Norfolk, read out her sentence. "Because thou hast offended against our sovereign, the King's grace, in committing treason against his person, the law of the realm is that she shall be burned here within the Tower of London, on the green, or to have her head smitten off." It was now down to King Henry VIII to have Anne either burnt at the stake or to have her head cut off. In the end, Henry showed Anne some mercy by allowing her to be executed by a French swordman. He did not want an English axeman to do the execution. On May the 16th, the night after her trial, Anne sat in the Tower of London. She was disturbed by a knock at the door. It was the Archbishop, Thomas Cranmer, who had come to dissolve her marriage to King Henry VIII. The next morning, May the 17th, Anne awoke early. She went to the window where she could see the green, and from there she could see the executions that were about to take place. That morning, all 5 men, Mark, Henry, Francis, William, and even Anne's own brother George, were beheaded one by one. When Anne was told the news about what happened to all 5 men, 5 men that she had conversations with, who she laughed with, had been executed, she turned around and said, "Oh, those poor souls, Jesus, have mercy on me." The next morning, on May the 18th, Anne prepared for her execution. But the executioner did not come. Instead, a message arrived to say that the execution is being delayed by 1 more day. This is because Henry didn't want an English axeman. He wanted a skilled French swordsman. Because Anne was the first person to be executed in the Tower, they had to be really quick to build a scaffold, just in case Henry had decided that he didn't want to execute Anne anymore, that he actually wanted to change his mind. It is Friday, the 19th of May, 1536, and Anne is sitting in the Queen's apartments. In her final hours, her mood is of hope and despair. Sir William Kingston, who spent time with Anne in her final hours, wrote, "I've seen many men and women executed, and all have shown great sorrow, but to my knowledge this lady has much joy and pleasure in death." Maybe Anne Boleyn thinks that King Henry is going to save her at the last hour, or maybe she has resigned to her fate. When Anne was told that Henry chose a sword, she laughed and showed her dark sense of humour and said, "It will be swift, as I only have a tiny neck." It is now 8:55 a.m. Anne is taken from her apartments and is led to the scaffold. As she is walking, she is desperately looking for a messenger, thinking that King Henry will stop the execution. Wearing dark colours instead of her more vibrant colours that she normally likes to wear. As she gets closer to the scaffold, Anne cannot see the sword, as it is hidden under the straw, not to alarm her. The executioner has already taken off his shoes, so that Anne cannot hear him coming. It is now 9 a.m. Anne removes her headdress and gives it to one of her ladies. Her ladies then give her a linen cap. She puts the cap on and she tucks all of her hair into the cap so that the sword doesn't get tangled with her hair. The executioner now steps forward. He kneels in front of Anne and begs for her forgiveness. He then says to Anne, "Say your prayers." The job has now been done. The crowd, they fall to their knees. They cannot believe what they have just witnessed. It is now 9:05 a.m. and the cannons at the Tower of London echo through the streets, signalling the Queen is now dead. The King hears the signal he has been waiting for. With no time to mourn, he boards his royal barge, travels to Chelsea into the arms of Jane Seymour. At 10 a.m, Anne's body is laid to rest, but not in a coffin, but in an arrow chest, as they did not have time to make Anne a coffin. Anne's body has now been brought to the Tower's chapel, and incredibly, she has been stripped of all of her jewellery and her blood-stained clothes. Now King Henry will give these clothes and all this jewellery to Jane Seymour, After Anne's execution, Thomas Cromwell and King Henry tried to erase Anne from history. They burned all of her letters and all of her portraits. But there was one thing that they couldn't get rid of. Despite Anne only being queen for 3 years, she leaves England one of its greatest legacies. 22 years later, against all odds, her daughter was crowned Queen Elizabeth I. She would go on to rule for 44 years. But Elizabeth never did forget her mother. She had a ring made, and inside that ring was a picture of her mother, Anne Boleyn. The only time she ever took that ring off was when it was removed on her deathbed. Anne Boleyn was buried in an unmarked grave. But she did not rest. To this day, there has been plenty of ghost stories surrounding Anne Boleyn. Some say she walks the corridors of the Tower of London. She has been seen gliding through the halls, her head tucked under her arms. Even at Haver Castle, where she spent her happiest days, Anne's spirit still lingers. People who visit have said they have seen her standing by the window, gazing out at them. Anne Boleyn was a queen destroyed, a woman betrayed, a life cut short, but yet centuries we still speak her name. Anne is not the only soul who refuses to rest. She is one of many, because some deaths are so horrific, so violent, that they are filled with unfinished business. Join me next time as we step beyond history and into a world of haunted souls who refuse to be forgotten. Are you brave enough to follow? Hit the notification bell if you dare. Until the next time, sleep tight.
Close to the coast, you can feel the breeze, mindful of ghostly tales washing up on the beach. Dolly is the believer, but Steve don't believe. Together they investigate.
Paranormal by the sea.
Paranormal by the sea. Is there really ghosts, or is it all just fantasy? Dolly is on a mission, she has something to prove. Steve is a true skeptic, together they're unmoved. Paranormal by the sea. Paranormal by the sea. Paranormal by the sea.
Paranormal by the sea.
Dolly stands her ground, so strong and so brave. Steve, being the skeptic, is so quick to run away. Debunk those jump scare sounds when there is drippage all around. If Dolly can't debunk it, she is backed up by Steve. If he can't debunk it, they ask the community. If the community can't debunk it, and they all agree, bringing in the evidence.
Paranormal by the sea.
Paranormal by the sea. Paranormal by the sea.
Paranormal by the sea.
Paranormal by the sea. Is there really ghosts, or is it all just fantasy? Dolly is on a mission, she has something to prove. Steve's a true skeptic, together they're unmoved. Paranormal by the sea.